Hi, welcome to Solutio. I am Colin Davis, and the websites are shadowtechalchemy.com, solutiopodcast.com, melissamarimovie.com, melissamarimusic.com, and that's about it for now with the websites. But so today we're going to be talking about what Melissa and I called 21st century alchemy, or more about the lifestyle, the way of being, what it is to be an alchemist and the way that we define that term. And so I think that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today, because there's a lot, you could spend a lot of time on that, and it really needs to be defined. And there's really, this is something that, once I start describing it to you, you'll understand it, and you probably already understand it if you're watching this. But we're going to be talking about that. I'll tell you a little bit more about how the book that I'm writing right now and the chapter on the complex, which I shared last week. Last week we went into this whole chapter on the complex, but that's been completely rewritten. I just keep going back over and over it again. And it's like a recapitulation of, I always write about the same thing. It's just started with Melissa and I mean, we were both investigating the shadow, and we were interested in how evil is created and what is the nature of the dark side of the human being. We were both interested in that for years. But when we came together, 2013 is when it would have been, very into 2012, beginning of 2013, that's when it really clicked, and we were just like, oh, we can do this together. We can really figure this out. And so we can figure out what is the nature of the dark side of humanity, the shadow of humanity in general terms, in societal terms, in biological terms, and we could also understand it in psychological and psychospiritual terms, and how does it apply to us? And then how do we balance this darkness, this aspect of ourselves in our own personal lives? How do we do shadow work? What is shadow work? How do we do it? How do we really do it? Do it for real. Not just talk, but let's really do it. Let's really evolve ourselves from the inside out. So that's what we were into. That's what this is done. This is all coming from that. And now we don't have Melissa, but it's my job to carry it on, to keep going with it, and to take it even more seriously. And now that little alchemical vessel of my relationship with Melissa has expired naturally, organically, even though it's been tough, real tough. This is part of the greater plan. It has to be that way. Of course it's that way. And so it's my job to figure out what that all means and to do something with that meaning. So I continue on, and like I've told this before, I've talked about this before, I wondered, after Melissa passed, what would happen to my energy, what would happen to my creativity, because she was such a muse. And I spent all of 2025 making a movie about her, and so I was really occupied with that. But now that's been done for 5 months now, and I got to see where my energy was going to be. And you know what? It didn't shift one bit. It didn't shift one bit. It's just stay on the mission. Stay on the mission. Do the alchemy. Keep evolving. Find the other alchemists. That was the mission. And so, and I don't feel that anything has changed at all. So it's just moving to a new phase of that now. And so I've been writing this new book. And so it's, we had Shadow Tech in 2015, and that was the first time that we put out our findings on the shadow. And we tried to bring a bunch of concepts together. I introduced integral theory at first there, and tried to, and the archetype of parasitism and all these kinds of things, what's called the zero and the one, that's the first chapter of the book that talks about the metaphysics of destruction and how it's built into the simulation, it's built into this reality. So that was there in the beginning. And there was shadow work practices in there, mainly the emotional processing that we got from John Ruskin. And Eckhart Tolle's pain body was in there. Was Tico in there? I don't think Tico was in there. I don't know if we knew. Yeah, we did know about Paul Levy. We did. We did. So it must have been in there. Probably was in there. But so that was the first attempt to put all this shadow understanding together. And then I didn't write anything for 9 years. We did interviews, we did workshops, we did Zoom calls and all kinds of things. But I didn't write another book. I wrote articles, but I didn't write another book. I felt like it had all been I needed to wait until more needed to be said. And then in 2024, Melissa was still with us at the time, and I tried to write it in 2022, but it wasn't coming out. But it came out in 2024. Transforming Darkness, that one. And I give that one away for free right now on the website, shadowtechalchemy.com. But yeah, so that one, and in that one I really went into autonomous complexes. I really focused on complexes, and I was focusing in terms of like the movement, because I'm always talking about, I'm always looking for the movement. Where's the movement that's going to carry this information and take this up and take it up with seriousness, right? Because the Jungians and the people from the human potential movement from the 60s and 70s are not really with us anymore, or they're well past the age of having enough energy to do something substantial. So I'm like, where is the new human potential movement? Where is it? I'm always looking for it. And when I put out Transforming Darkness, I was talking to the red-pilled people, right? All the people who are waking up to the shadow side of the system, of the culture, right? And because I was quote-unquote red-pilled back in 2005. But after COVID happened, then a lot of new people started coming into this kind of information. And so I was like, okay, this movement, there's so many people now waking up to the shadow side of reality. And what they're waking up to is the external correlate to what's going on inside the shadows of us internally in the psyche. The Jungian shadow, which is basically discussed as something within the human being. It's also discussed as within the relational fields of people, and how that it's projected out into the world. But in terms of integral theory, this is upper left-hand quadrant and lower left-hand quadrant. It's mainly there. It doesn't really go into the body and into the structures of society so much. So in that book, I put the Jungian shadow into integral theory's 4-quadrant model, and I broke it out, and I showed you how the shadow manifests in all domains of human reality. And that was a novel thing. That had not been done before. And I didn't fill it out with too much detail. I kind of just, here it is, and some basics. And so that was in that book, and there was a lot on complexes in there, and then there was like a bunch of shadow work practices in all 4 quadrants. So it's a really novel approach, really, but the issue is that people don't want to look at it, right? Because that's the kind of material that people should be like, oh wow, let's do this work, let's take this on. Share this with each other, talk about the shadow work practices that they're doing, ask questions. How does this work? How does that work? Other people would copy it, of course, and start talking about it on their own YouTube channels. And then that would spur a movement of people doing it. And I never thought of myself as like the leader of a movement or anything like that. I just thought, okay, well, here's my little contribution, and this thing must be building. It must be. This red pill group is probably the the group a certain percentage of them is gonna break off and really start recognizing how all this shadow stuff they're researching is sourced in the individual psyche. But it didn't happen. Well, it's only been 2 years. I mean, and Melissa and I are always, we didn't want to be more advanced, than the than the intellectuals even. Neither of us went to college. We're not bona fide, credentialed intellectuals. But it turns out that our thoughts, our systems that we come up with, and the way we talk about things and put things together in a systems level way, in a holistic way, in an integral way, you could say, or second tier way. The way we did that naturally is something that just is more advanced than where the great majority of people are, and even intellectuals. And so it's kind of like it's not on their radar, so to speak. And I didn't realize that was going to be the case. I didn't realize that. And we presented things to Jungian groups and stuff, and we thought, well, the Jungians will take this up. They were kind of, they're just, everybody's hiding. Everybody's hiding from this shadow stuff. And this is the exact same thing that, in Jungian psychology, there's so many other subjects to work with besides the shadow. And so in that whole community, the way it was kind of dealt with was that was a module, that was a section, and it was discussed and it was dealt with, and there was a handful of Jungians that really focused on it, but most of them didn't. It was kind of just part of the whole thing, and there was so much more to focus on. And so that's just the way they dealt with it, and that's the way they kind of held it in cognitive dissonance. And they all accepted it. This is real. The shadow's real. Projection's real. Mass projection, collective projection is real, and all of that. But we don't really have to spend our lives focusing on that. And they didn't. And so it kind of just stayed in the underground. And Carl Jung himself didn't want that to happen. And there was, for example, I have a book right here I'm going to probably mention later. I've mentioned it many times, Depth Psychology and a New Ethic by Erich Neumann, it came out in 1949. So, and Carl Jung wrote the foreword to it. And he said, hey, we just had World War II. Everybody just slaughtered each other. This was a collective mass hysteria. This is collective shadow projection. And this is insane, literally. This is psychotic and insane. And we've been taken over by shadow archetypes. And we Jungians understand how this works. And so we propose a new ethic of shadow awareness, and as many people as possible to start taking individuation seriously and start holding each other to a higher level of responsibility to work with your shadow material. That was put out in 1949. In 1949, Jung and Neumann were saying this. And did anybody listen? No. Where are the academics? They just went off into la-la land. They just got bought off. They just they just became contractors for the different complexes, the different structural civilizational complexes, the military-industrial complex, the pharma complex. That's what they did. And tech, and everything just went into tech, and everything just got totally materialistic. And then they got into feminism, fourth wave feminism, and deconstructionism and postmodernism and all this kind of stuff, which is interesting for a second, but it's interesting for a second, like literally for a second. All that stuff, like 3 decades of them concentrating on all that stuff, all that postmodernism. And it's like, okay, you just spent 3 decades hyper-focusing on something that's one part of the puzzle and just not getting into second tier. and not doing any work on themselves. And the academics, the intellectuals, the intelligentsia, they just let the parasitic corporations and government agencies just dumb everybody down and feed them full of crud. And they just went along with it, and they just said, well, this is our place. We're sandwiched right in the middle between the elites and the proletariat. And that's our job, to basically manage the proletariat for the elites. And that's what they did. And so all the good stuff, the deep stuff, just fell by the wayside. That's what happened. And the people are just not on their own advanced enough. They need leadership. And the people who were put there to be leaders, or who had intergenerationally, walked into those jobs, had basically been, given those positions through nepotism. They just failed, completely failed us. So now we just have a big old traumatized, shadow-infested, dumbed-down nation here in America. And Europe is better. It is better. But the government to them is like the big mama. And they got a mother projection going on with the government. And they don't have the kind of individualism that it takes to stand up and do their own thing. They just go along they just go with the flow. But over here, we're so individualistic that we can't work together. And we're just so individualistic at a adolescent level. We're like a bunch of 16-year-olds here in America. So anyway, that's where we're at. But that's not everyone. That's not everyone. That's a lot of people. It's like the bulk of it. It's like, if I use the body analogy, most people are tissue cells, muscle cells, or fat cells, They're not neurons. So it's the job of the neurons, and those are the intellectuals, and they failed us, and so now there's us. We're the intellectual outsiders. We're the alchemists, right? We're the ones who are doing what should have been done. And everyone that was on the line of the human potential movement, all those people coming from, the 60s, and Tim Leary and John Lilly and all that, and everybody that was at Esalen Institute and Big Sur, and all the types of therapy that came out, and all the true psychologists, researchers, theorists that were coming out with all kinds of new understandings of the psyche and how things work, and what you could do with yourself, and taking psychedelics to the next level, and all of that, and Stan Grof and all that stuff. That human potential movement, we're in line with that. Those are our people. We're in line with that. Now, the ball got dropped with those guys. The ball got dropped after tech started. I'd say I kind of think of the year 2000 as kind of like the crossover into the information age. I think it's thought about it that way. I think that's mainstream. The year 2000 is kind of it. Entrance into the information age, and into tech materialism, the digital age. And so then the boomers, and would be the silent generation behind them, that brought in the human potential movement. They just kind of scattered. They got older. They did their own thing or whatever, and they had to kind of just tuck in or whatever. And then this new materialism came in, and so that's where we are, and so now it's like, okay, there's a handful of us. There are alchemists out there, and they don't know they're alchemists, and they don't have they're not. A lot of alchemists are like lab workers. A lot of people who are really working on themselves deeply are like in the lab. They're in the lab. They're not messing around with politics and larger stuff and stuff. They're in the lab. They're working on themselves. And Melissa and I, we both had kind of like an ethical bone. We had a political bone, an activist, that's the word. We had an activist bone in our bodies. And so we were always, and you know, Melissa, she was doing it through her music, and that was kind of her activism, was conscious music. And so we you know, we kind of thought in that way. It's like, okay, this is our laboratory. We're going to figure out a lot of this stuff. We're going to work on ourselves really deep, and we're going to really figure out a lot of this inner healing, and then we're going to systematize it and share it. Maybe not systematize it too much, but share what we're doing. And so that was the plan, and it's still the plan. But it's like now I'm outside of the personal lab now that she's not here, I'm out, and I'm like, okay, so now that move to the next level, where are the other alchemists? I know they're out there. I've come in touch with them. They're the ones who read our books and post a review on Amazon or send me an email or start communication with us, follow us, come on programs like this. Those are the alchemists. And I recognize that not all alchemists are going to be naturally attuned to us, or now it's just me, you know, to my way of speaking and being and all of that. I'm not suggesting that it should be that way, but I am able to kind of gauge, you know, where people are at and stuff. And so I'm kind of out there, and I'm like scanning. I'm scanning, and that's what this show is about. This show is about, I just get on this show every Tuesday, and I just talk from the point of view of a true alchemist who's dedicating his whole life to this. And then I just let it get into the world. It's up on YouTube, and anybody that finds it has the right and permission to share it with anybody else that they know that's an alchemist, and just let it go into the collective. And you know, I keep putting out books, and I do workshops from time to time, and now I'm going to start doing public workshops, and so I'm doing my little thing. But you know, I can't make anybody take this, and I can't find all the alchemists on my own. So I can do my little part, and then those of us who are in this clique, in this crew, those of us who are on this leg of the human potential movement, we can help each other, and we can make stuff happen. Now, my dream is that eventually we'll get to the point to where we've connected enough to where we can actually have a yearly conference. Yearly conference. But right now we need to find each other. Find each other, help each other, and find each other and help each other. So that's kind of that's what I wanted to say there. Now I want to bring in another aspect here. Let me go into detail, a little bit more detail about the alchemical way, about the alchemical life, and how that it is. If people say, well, what is alchemical life? What is an alchemist? I don't really get it. I mean, I just was now talking about it, talking around it. And I mentioned psychospirituality and self-healing. And I mentioned the new human potential movement and all of that. And I mentioned some people in there. So you got the feeling, you know, you probably already know, but people that wouldn't know who saw this, they would get the feeling, oh, okay, he's talking about people who are working on themselves. He's talking about spiritual people, right? Spiritual people, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah, we're talking about spiritual people, but let me use some other terms here now. The term bohemian fits right into this. And And if you don't know what a bohemian is, you can just put it in and look at the Wikipedia entry or whatever, find an article on it. But a lot of people kind of know that. It's in our vernacular. It's in our it's in the culture. And so bohemians, I mean, the actual, I mean, Bohemia is what's now called the Czech Republic, right? Prague is Bohemia. And it's got a whole history of being kind of like a Renaissance city and territory. And all kinds of magicians and alchemists and people would hang out there and stuff, and influence the royalty and things like that. And so that's the Middle Ages. But in the probably mid 19th century, right, in the 1800s, you had a lot of gypsies, the Romani, the gypsies. They came down from that area and they went to France. And so you had a lot of kind of street people and gypsy people, artist people, bards, you could call them, hippies, street hippies. That's what the gypsies are. And they're like Romanian, right? And so, I mean, originally or whatever, I believe. But so the term broadened out from there to be actually artists and intellectuals, or artists who are also intellectuals, who wanted to live alternative lifestyles. They didn't want to join the matrix, so to speak. They didn't want to have, probably didn't want to have families and wanted to be free-spirited people, and hippies, basically, like artist intellectual hippies. What we saw in the 60s was kind of like a resurgence of that. So this is the 19th century version of that. And they're into literature and poetry and art of all kinds, and they're going to coffee shops and they're talking, and it's mainly young people, but not all. And of course it's mainly young people in their 20s and 30s maybe, because that's your most experimental years. And so these are bohemians. But then it just broadened out to mean anyone who is consciously living an alternative lifestyle and who is consciously, not plugging into the matrix, so to speak, right? A bohemian is, it's somebody with an artistic bent and an intellectual bent, who's outside of the system and is creatively figuring out a way to live on the edge of traditional life. And then you kind of have, within that category, you have sort of the lower level, or kind of people who are, in Jungian psychology, we would call them puers and puellas, eternal children, right? So they're couch surfers, and they're just hanging out, and they're smoking weed, and they're couch surfing or whatever, figuring it out, or maybe they're cashing a welfare check or whatever, and they're just not growing up. But they're, and they're kind of living in an alternative lifestyle, kind of, maybe on the street, or maybe not on the street, but not these days, but, just kind of not using the situation in the most creative way possible. And then as you kind of go up the sort of class structure within this bohemian mode, then you get people who are more like me, right? People who are more like me, or my new friend Lauren, or plenty of people that I know, right? My friend Monica, or Melissa, obviously, and plenty of other people that I know who, because I come from musician world, right? And so musician world is like a form of bohemianism. Yes. Musician world, being a professional musician, is, because professional musician, the word professional makes you think suit and tie and all that stuff. But being a professional musician is not that. It's not a suit and tie world at all, as everybody knows. Backstage world, life on the bus or life in the van, and going around from city to city and playing festivals and all that kind of stuff. It's like a bohemianism, but there's not a whole lot of intellectualism in that version of it. But so I've been in that level for a long time. And then as I moved out of the musician world and more into the intellectual world, I'm still plugged into musician world, but I have this intellectual layer on top. Now it's like now I'm climbing the ladder of the class structure within this bohemian lifestyle or way of being. I'm calling it alchemist, the new alchemist, the 21st century alchemists. And then you might find people who have family wealth. And I don't necessarily place them higher up on the totem pole, but kind of in terms of the economic structure of it, they're definitely, they're able to live comfortably, but still live outside of mainstream society. So that's nice. That's a nice bonus if you have that. But if you don't have that, you have to be more creative, right? So that's how I did it. So for example, I had a roll-up door warehouse, like a loft, we call it, in California. And I lived on the outskirts of San Francisco, not in San Francisco, out in the East Bay, where it's a lot less expensive, right? And I have my music studio in there, my band practice studio, and my recording studio, and my office and my apartment. I have my kitchen and bedroom and everything and shower, and it's all in this one unit. And it's got a lot of space because it's kind of a semi-industrial, light industrial space. And I fixed it up and everything. And then I have extra space, and then I sublet my extra space to people for storage and things like that. So I get my rent down to something. So basically, I was there. I had that place for 20 years. And sometimes I lived with a roommate or something down the street from there, but a lot of times I lived there. And my rent was down to, with the sublets added to it and all of that, my rent and bills were like $800 a month, right? So then I could be an audio engineer. That was my profession, still is. And then I could do that, and I could basically I could work a part-time schedule. And then I have all this other time for reading, for studying, for spending time in nature, working on myself, traveling. And I used my band is how I traveled. So I'm not just like sitting in Pacheco, California. Every year I'm going somewhere. I'm going to Europe. I'm going to Japan. I'm going to Canada. I'm going, wherever. And I'm experiencing other cultures. And when I get there, I'm hanging out. I stay longer than the rest of the band. I make friends. I stay with them. I investigate these other countries and everything, and I open my mind. I expand my mind. So I'm living a total bohemian lifestyle and have been, all my adult life. And but my version of that is what we call the alchemist. So I'm creatively carving out a life for myself, and then I'm using that time for psycho-spiritual research and development on myself. And in my relationships, of course. Right? So that's what this is. And so I'm I'm already doing what I'm suggesting that others are doing or could be doing out there. And I'm looking for the others to do this. I'm also acting as an example for other people to look at and see how this kind of life works. This is a good life. I have a good life. I do. I have a really good life. Sometimes, depending on the situation and how things are going, sometimes it can get a little sketchy. It has gotten a little sketchy in terms of finances, right? So it makes you be creative. It keeps you on your toes, but you feel alive. And I'm not going to fall out on and live on the street or anything like that. It's not going that low. But you're running your own business, you're doing your own thing, and you have this alternative way of life. It's not always easy. But working for, I worked for Whole Foods for 1 year. I've worked for an employer one time in 25 years. For 1 year. That's where Melissa worked. And I went to work there for 1 year just to, cause it was actually right before COVID, but my business was not doing well. That business, audio engineering is especially mastering, which is what I do. It's been really it's better now actually than it was. It's kind of up and down. But so I started working there part-time. And so I had to clock in, and it was only part-time. It was only 2 or 3 days a week. I think it was only 2 most of the time, but I still couldn't stand it. It wasn't that I couldn't get there on time. I could. I would travel there with her. And it was just that I would be standing around. I was in the maintenance department, right? So I'm clean up on aisle 9 or whatever, or getting all the trashes and all that kind of stuff and cleaning. I was the janitor. That's what you call it. So I was the janitor there for a year. And truthfully, cleaning and doing janitorial work and stuff, I like that actually. I like cleaning. I was an auto detailer for several years. I had my own auto detailing business. And I liked that. I like that. I like cleaning. I like, doing stuff like that, just being real conscientious and cleaning stuff up and making it look real nice and everything. I like that. And I don't mind being a janitor. That's fine. That wasn't it. I can't do any job where all my energy and labor is going towards, somebody else's thing. It's not that I can't do social, that I can't give back to society. But the way I give back to society is the way I'm naturally talented and I'm naturally oriented to give back to society. Shows like this, where, I take your comments and I take your phone calls, and you can talk with me about whatever, or doing coaching calls where I work with you on your inner work and doing shadow work with you and all the depth psychology that I do with people. That's a much better way for me to give back, right? And a lot of the work that I do with people, I don't charge them for it. Sometimes I do, I do for sometimes, but sometimes I don't. When I meet people that need my help, they just get my help. And so it's a mix. I do plenty of giving back, but I give back in the way where I'm really supposed to give back. And being a janitor at a grocery store is not the way for me to give back, or, doing anything that's working for some company. That's not the way creative people are supposed to be. Creative people are supposed to give back in the way that use their vocation, their daimon, their highest calling to do that. So I went there for a year and I was like, I couldn't take that. I couldn't stand just doing that for 8 hours a day and thinking, oh my God, all the creative time that I could be doing, researching, writing another book, making music, working on other people's music. Oh, that's the other way that I give back. I work on other musicians' music. They send me their music. It's not in complete form. I give them feedback. I help them get it to a higher level. I mix it, I master it, I put it back out there, give it back to them. So I'm giving back in that way too. But working for another company where I'm, not using my highest talents, people do that. Most people are doing that. And we can't do that. We alchemists, we can't do that. We can start our own businesses. If that's our passion, we have our own business. We can't work for other people doing mundane, stupid stuff. That's soul robbery. We can't do that. So that's that's one of the areas that sets us out from a lot of people. Now, there's plenty of creative people that will agree with me, entrepreneurs and creative people, but they're not alchemists. And so this way of being is conscious austerity. Consciously limiting your materialism and consciously carving out your life in such a way so that you will not get too speedy, too distracted, too caught up in the world. And you can stay grounded in yourself, and you can stay spiritually connected. You have time to go into nature. You have time to meditate. You have time to do your shadow work. You have time to do your studies. You have time for reading. Because you have consciously put together a life for yourself where you just don't have those kinds of responsibilities. Now, people will say, well, what about having children? Can you have children and be an alchemist or whatever? Yes, you can, definitely. Of course you can. You can. But then again, you still have to very consciously make your lifestyle. And it does make it, it does make it so that, there's certain times of your years with the family are going to be harder to have more time when children are younger, right, than when they're older. And then if you have to provide for children and you need to have more income, well, then you're going to have to sort of have a niche, have an in, have a talent or something that allows you to do that. So it's still something that alchemists can do, but it depends on the individual. But that said, probably a lot of bohemians and alchemists and people on this path probably are not having children. And I would say to that, I don't have children, but I so deeply recognize I love children, and I always have. And I so deeply recognize how having children grows you up. It's a real biological initiation, and it grows you up and it opens your heart. And it just totally opens your heart and develops you, and how important that is. So people who don't have children have to open their hearts up in relationships. And they have to grow up through conscious inner work, through individuation. And so it's a different path. It's not that you can't grow up this way. You can, because a lot of people that have children don't grow up. But it's a little bit different mode. And I would say with 8 billion people on the planet right now, and with the level of consciousness that most people are at, we don't really need any more people. And, a lot of Christians and traditionalists and, not call them traditionalists, conservatives will say, oh, of course we need more people, go forth and multiply and all this stuff. And they're obviously we have to continue on the species, but it's more important it's more important for people to be quality people than it is to just have quantity of people. There are times in the development of a civilization when quantity is necessary, right? When a third of the population dies of diseases and childbirth or gets killed by natives or in wars or whatever, quantity is important, right? But then once you have the kinds of modern society and stuff, quantity is not as important as quality. And it does turn out that having one child is probably not as healthy for children as having 2 children. But it's like we can afford, definitely, to have a whole lot of people who don't have children, but who really concentrate on evolving themselves, and then who pass that on to other people. give their knowledge back to other people because they had the opportunity to spend all that time on themselves, and then to mentor other people and to put something creative and something evolutionary into the world. And so it turns out that people who are evolved people who are putting out evolved culture, they're writing books, they're doing lectures, they're reproducing their ideas and their experiences through media, through culture. And people are and reaching a lot of people that way. That is in many ways more important than just having children and putting genetic bodies into the world and just saying, figure it out on your own, right? So both make sense. Both modes of being make sense. And right now with so many people, it's just not as necessary. So what it is necessary is those for us that don't have children to take our inner work, our development so seriously, and then to help other people to share what we've learned with other people. So that's everything I just now said. This is all in the ethics. This is the alchemical ethics that I'm talking about here. And I'm kind of just going around it and all of that, but you're getting the point. So, looking at my notes here, and so yes, and so I mentioned Eric Neumann, Depth Psychology and a New Ethic. This is inside of us. This is our ethic. And that is shadow awareness, shadow work, and shadow awareness, and shadow aware culture. We do the shadow work on ourselves. We become shadow aware on ourselves. We do the shadow work on ourselves. And then we share that with other people, and then we hold other people to those standards, right? And to be gentle with that, because people who are just not at this level they don't understand it. They don't know what to say. They just get reactive and blow you off. So you have to figure out how to do that, but that's what we do. So we have shadow aware ethics, and there's no hypocrisy allowed in that. It's not just about talk. It's about you're doing it. You're doing it. So very high integrity, shadow aware ethics, and living your life. And this is why I put out the whole 4 quadrants, shadow and 4 quadrants thing, is so that you can see how the shadow manifests in the personal psyche and how to do individual shadow work. You can see how the shadow manifests in the relational field and in the culture, and start to clean up your information intake and your information output, and to clean up your relational field and do high-level alchemical conflict resolution with your partners, with your friends, with your family, cleaning up their relational field, lower left-hand quadrant, cleaning up your body, right? All of the health and nutrition and body awareness and somatic practices, somatic shadow work practices, upper right-hand quadrant. And then the lower right-hand quadrant, how you plug into the society and being very conscious of what you're doing in business, what you're doing with contracts. Are you working with nasty, parasitic banks and corporations and stuff like that? Where are you putting your money? What's your environmental footprint? What's your, how do you plug into the matrix, so to speak? And are you doing that in the cleanest way possible? So this is all shadow-aware ethics, shadow-aware lifestyle. And so that's what we're doing. That's inside of being a 21st century alchemist. And so I think that's, let me see if that's everything that's on my list of kind of, I mentioned the puer, right? And the artist, I'm looking at my notes here, the artist and stuff. But I have something in here, yeah, about artists. because I know that there are people, there's kind of like a spectrum. There's a spectrum of people who are more on the right brain side and people who are more on the left brain side. And so this movement of alchemists, it's got people more on the right brain side and more on the left brain side, more on the intellectual side, more on the art side. It's both. And everybody wants to you got to try to get in the center if you can. But I was talking to Lauren today about art and artists, and how our society, our materialistic society, American especially, has really just degraded the artists and just treated them like crap. And we had that huge explosion of art in the 60s. And then we got all that great music in the 60s and the 70s, and even into the 80s and 90s it lasted. We just got so much artistic material out of that giant explosion, that bohemian explosion that happened. And then tech came in and everything kind of just flattened it out, and we're just in horizontal. I've talked about this. The vertical is the sacred, and the horizontal is the profane. And we're just in this horizontal flatland. And Europe is a lot better in terms of their attitude towards artists. But in America, they just dumped us. And it's just, man, we are just really. And so us as alchemists, we are in the bohemian side, and we are artists, a lot of us. And so you need the artistic mindset to even be an alchemist. I didn't even say this, but the Jungian, I didn't even say this. I have to say this right now. And I have to say this right now. The Jungian, not the PhD Jungian, the natural Jungian. I call them natural Jungians. The natural Jungian is the alchemist. Okay, that's what it is. That's another. Now, I talked around it and all up and down it and everything to really fill it out. And then I'm like, oh yeah, the Jungian. That's what it is. The alchemist is naturally attracted to Jung. They don't have to know it at first or anything, but when they find Jung, they're like, oh, okay, yep. That's my tribe right there. Now, you might go look at the Jungians, at all the boomers and stuff, and be like, oh, I don't really fit with these people. Like kind of like soft-spoken academics and I got some warrior in me, and I'm like, come on, guys, wake up over there. I like Robert Moore, Robert L. Moore, because he's a badass. But yeah, so the Jungians, that really, if you kind of figure out what it is to be a Jungian, a natural Jungian, then that does that. So let's go to your comments now. We're about an hour in, so I can kind of move towards the direction of folks wanting to talk, and if anybody wants to call in, they can call in, or if you want to just go into the chat, let's do that. And I won't just keep talking. If people want to talk to me, I'll talk back, and I'll break things up so that we can talk. But so hi to everybody that was saying hi in there. Hi. And so Lauren says, Colin, I need to clean up my relational field, but I don't have good conversational conflict skills, or I have fear. How can I clean up this field? You're doing a good job right now. Okay, let me see what else you said, and then we'll go to that. Like, if I feel heavy or helpless at the stage and shape some relationships are in, don't have good conversational conflict skills. Well, you and I kind of ran into a little bump the other day, and I thought we worked that out. And all right, let's talk about this at the level of where she's talking about that with friends and people that are in your sphere, your friends, your coworkers, who who are in your life, people that you like, they like you, and you're hanging out with them and all of that. But inevitably, your complexes, your pain body, your complexes interact with theirs, and they need to have some playtime, right? So your shadow complexes need to have some playtime. Some shadow energy needs to be moved, right? Somebody needs to be abusive, and then somebody needs to be victimized, right? That archetypal pattern has to run, right? That's what's going on in any conflict. And you can do it with yourself too. You know, if you don't have anybody to play with, you can just kind of you can have your inner critic can attack you, and you can have parts of yourself attack yourself, and you can kind of be spun through the spin cycle of conflict on your own if you want to, and then you can go drink or shoot up some heroin or whatever to try to finish off the cycle. So you don't have to have somebody else to do it with. But that's usually how it's going on. So the best thing, the most advanced and best thing is for the people who are in your life, who you really value, for them to be at least up to speed in a basic level on what you're doing and how you like to work with conflict, and how that you understand that conflict is a doorway into self-awareness and to long-term healing. And that you don't like conflict, but that you don't want to run away from it, because you know that when conflict arises, something has been triggered that's in the shadow, that's touching a wound that needs to get pulled up, and it needs to get aired out, and it needs to get put attention on so that it can heal. And when people are in relationships where conflicts are turning, they're habitual, they're chronic, and then people don't actually tend to those wounds when they get pulled up, and they just kind of separate and just let things die down, and then they come back together, and eventually they have another conflict, and then they just separate. They never actually evolve. They never really heal. And a lot of wounds don't get pulled up unless you're in relationship, because that's how they were formed. They were formed in the family unit, or if not your family, your parents' or ancestors' family, and this stuff was passed on. This is how these original wounds, how our complexes get dysregulated and wounded in the first place, is in relationship, right? Self-object relationship and attachment style stuff, all this kind of talk. And so it's in relationship when this stuff's going to get triggered, and it's in relationship when where you can best heal this material or these wounds, calm these complexes down. If you look into IFS, internal family systems, they have a whole language that talks about all that, and you can look at it through that lens, and it makes a lot of sense. It's anthropomorphized, but it makes sense. So that's the first thing, is if people can actually, and I know a lot of people are more new to the whole thing, and so as you get familiar enough with the language and familiar enough with the techniques, as you read the IFS material or other material that deals with relational conflict healing and working with your complexes and stuff, as you work with that, you can start telling your friends of what you're doing, right? If your friends can't hear about your psychological, psychospiritual interests and what you're doing, well then, they're not really. I mean, you can still have acquaintances. You're always going to have acquaintances or friends, in quotes, who you can talk to about other stuff, but not this, and you can still be friendly with them or whatever, friends at work, or even old friends from high school and stuff that still want to hang out and everything, but they never really got to your level. Yeah, you can still be friends with them, and you're just not going to really talk with them and stuff, but you're not going to talk to them about this. But at some point, if you're hanging out with people enough, you're going to get into conflicts, and if you want to keep hanging out with them, they're going to have to know what you're doing. So that's the first thing I'm going to say on that, and then I'm going to see what else Lauren said, and so I can keep kind of making sure this is going towards her. I'm still not clear on the complex that was pulling in people who would come to, for instance, become harshly verbally abusive. True, I really do like IFS. Yeah, so this is, you have to think back to your family, right? You have to think back to your family or even to your parents' family. And this kind of, I was actually had an epiphany on this that it applies exactly to that situation yesterday. And I'm trying to bring up what it was. Let me talk around it and see if I get to it, because it has to do with certain psychological theory. Pulling in people who would come up, for instance, be harshly, verbally abusive, right. Well, Melissa and I call it the victim-victor complex, or the victim-victor script, right? And so somebody is going to play victim and somebody's going to play aggressor, perpetrator. And if it's in your personality type to stay on the victim side, well, then that's going to basically open the door for one of their shadow complexes, some shadow warrior complex in them, to get active and start attacking. And it's not them doing it, it's a part, and they don't know what's going on. They're getting taken over by a complex. And so, like we've talked about, when you're working with this material, you have to recognize that both parties are actually stimulating it. Even the victim who's on the receiving end is sending messages. Their complex is sending messages to the other person, attack me, right? So it's going like that. And so even though people who kind of identify on the victim side and continue to have relationships that are abusive will not be happy with somebody like me saying that they're starting the conflict unconsciously, that there's a part of them that wants that. But it's true. And I've said this many times, I've realized this, is that when you're at the stage of relationships where you still have to work out strong boundaries and, to not let other people's parts, their monkey parts, abuse you, it's not very, it doesn't sound right to say, well, we're both 50-50. It's both two, there's two sides of the coin here. And yes, you're attacking me, but I know it's half me. That kind of just kind of sets you up for more abuse. So when you're at that level, you have to set your boundaries. You have to learn to set healthy boundaries. So that's first. But at some point you get to the point of a higher level understanding of going, oh, okay, my complex is playing into these fights and together we're doing this. So the remedy for that is you've got to go into those complexes and find those original wounds and start tending to those and start healing those. Whether you call it inner child work or whether you call it IFS or whether I call it emotional processing, emotional clearing, right? And then if you can do that in a relationship with somebody else who's aware, I mean, I would say you can do it with a proper therapist, but good luck finding one of those these days. So this is going to be kind of up to you, and then you train your partner, and then you have an alchemical relationship. And so you got to work on these parts. You got to pull up these vulnerabilities and you got to integrate these vulnerabilities. Pull up the roots of those vulnerabilities. Pull them up and get your ego to be able to metabolize this stuff that's been repressed. These old memories, these old feelings, these victimhood feelings. And what comes on the other side of the coin is rage, because every victim builds up rage. So there's rage on the other side. And so the grief, the shame, the sadness, that stuff needs to be pulled up. And then the rage on the other side of it needs to be pulled up. And this stuff needs to be metabolized into the ego. The ego can't metabolize it right now in full. And so it's down there. And so the complex has fuel. And so we basically are draining the complex of the emotional fuel that it has to do these things. And so that's kind of how we do that. And then we tell our partners about it, and then we help our partners do that in their lives. We help them come into their wounded material and to start to drain their complexes, so to speak. And so that's kind of how we're doing this. Right, it's an autonomous complex taking over. Right, where is this coming from saying attack me? I want to understand when I started feeling I deserved that, I suppose. Yeah. Is it the rage in me that's asking to be attacked so I can find the parts that got dissociated? No, I wouldn't say it that way. It's the complex structure. You know, look at Israel-Palestine, right? It's like, if you look at it from the point of view of an autonomous complex that lives in the field between both of those ethnicities, between both of those peoples, right? You can see that there is an autonomous system, a nodal network, I've been saying lately, a nodal network of the collective psyche, shared in the psyches of all the people, that is addicted to the rage and the pain, right? Now, your ego hates rage and pain. It doesn't like it. It's like, that's why it's shadow material to the ego. The ego dissociates and walls that off. And so the ego places a membrane, a wall, a dissociative wall, and then all the rage and pain, the grief and all the shadow stuff lives down underground. And then it makes its own little mafia. It makes its own little deep state down there. And then it gets fed off of this energy. And so it's influencing the egos, and through projection, it's getting people to think, well, if I can attack the other party, and that will offload some of my shadow material and I'll feel better. So one party attacks the other party as a way to offload shadow material, and then they attack back as a way to offload some of their shadow material, but all they're doing is making the underground system larger, right? And so then it just has more and more influence, and then eventually it's like what we call a necrotrophic parasite. It's a parasite that just gets so bloated that and so powerful that it ends up just killing the host, right? And then it kills itself in the process. But so this is like a mechanical type of, automatic type of operation going on in the psyche, and it doesn't know any better except to just keep doing what it's doing. Now, look at that in the individual psyche. Look at that in the individual psyche, and how we can have a deep state in our own psyches that actually is used to the pain of feeling like crap of getting abused, or used to dumping rage on other people. That's what their deep state is. That's what it likes to eat. And and this is coming out of relational trauma. This is coming out of early life and our parents' early lives. You can at least go back. You can go back, I don't know how many generations you want to go, because this is archetypal and it's in all peoples all the time. But your particular recipe of it is in your family, and a great deal of it is coming from your parents and grandparents. That's kind of where the bulk of it is coming from. Plus, however they ended up unconsciously turning the same cycle themselves, that just epigenetically presented the opportunity for these codes to start running in you. And so So when you're looking for your trauma and how you were abused or neglected, abandoned, and the kinds of material that showed up, the reaction to that, the sadness, the grief, the rage that showed up as a reaction to that, you can look to your family for that. But you kind of if you can't find a huge amount of it in your own family, you have to look back another generation and see, oh, I see, it's kind of compiled. And it kind of maybe skips generations maybe or something, and it kind of just gets compiled. We don't really understand how it works. We can just kind of look at it generally and go, yeah, it's working something like that. So now you have a complex or multiple complexes, just like I do, just like how Melissa did, just like how everybody else does, that are basically have a diet of this shadow material, and then they direct they influence other complexes, and they basically get involved. And that's why I love using as above, so below, and I love using the metaphor or the lens of politics, geopolitics, and all of that, because that just shows you. They talk about the deep state, the shadow government, and you have complexes, the military industrial complex and the pharma government complex and the media government you have these complexes, and they all kind of work together, and they just keep on feeding the people all the junk that they need to see and hear to keep the complexes fed. And all that ends up doing is just dumbing down and poisoning and killing the people, sending their sons and daughters to war, and it just hurts the people, while the unconscious complex, gets more life, while the deep state gets more life. Well, the same things, this is how you know it's true. When you can use as above, so below, and you can see, oh, I see that system out there. I see it clearly because it's out there, so you can see it. It's hard to see what's in here, but you can see what's out there. And once you see what's out there, and then the very fact that you're tuned into it means that you're on it. Now you just turn it around and go, how is that in me? How is that in working in me? And this is one of the main tools that we alchemists use. We use this. As above, so below is the first alchemical maxim in the Emerald Tablet of Thoth. So we use that. That is like our like the detective's magnifying lens, right? Because you can't see what's inside the psyche. So you have to use expressions and reflections to deduce what's in there. And because of the sort of fractal, holarchic or holonic way that reality manifests, we can kind of go, oh, that layer out there is self-similar. We call it self-similarity, self-similar to this layer in here. So that's how we kind of do that. Okay, so now, Lauren, is it the rage in me? Oh, no, let's go to this one here. I know my grandfather was horrifically mean and terrifying. Yes. Melissa's grandfather, her mother's father, was also horrifically mean and terrorizing. And to the point to where Melissa's mother was so traumatized that she became a schizophrenic in her 40s, right? And had to be committed. And so, so this stuff, right, so you're getting this junk, you're getting this deep state from these folks. But you're very advanced, because I know you and I know you're very advanced, and I know that this is your job, this is what you're here to do. This is a big part of what you're here to do, is to work through this material and heal yourself, at least partially, and then teach what you've learned to other people. That's why you're in this tribe with me. So, hi Shelley. If my complex pushes on the field of a stranger who may not know about shadow work, would I resolve the conflict any differently than, say, with a friend or partner who is familiar with the shadow work? Great question. Let's go back to Lauren again, because I've been talking to Lauren lately. And so she had a conflict with an old friend. I don't know if he's a boyfriend or an old friend, but she had a conflict with him. And there was something in the field, But it's the same situation as when you're with a stranger, like what you're talking about. But what she did is, what Lauren did is she worked with herself, and she worked with imagery. She did active imagination, and she worked to clear the field in herself even when she wasn't around him. And then the next time she saw him, she noticed that the whole field had shifted. And I can tell you, I've told this story many times about how Melissa did that with her mother, that she and her mother had a lot of anger between them. But as she started doing this work and doing all this emotional clearing, then we really worked with her mother complex, her negative mother complex. We worked on that a lot. And she was able to clear a lot of anger. Her mother had anger towards her, and she had, even though her mother was in the mental home, basically, it was like a halfway house type thing, and her mother was in her 80s by then. And we went over there together, and it was the first time Melissa had gone over there, and there was no anger. The anger was gone. And so this definitely works, and I've done this many times too. You can definitely, when you have a conflict with another person, it activates your reactivity. It activates your warrior stuff and your boundary making stuff and all of that. So it's not easy to do, but if you can sit with it and you can use active imagination and you can bring your heart into it, and you can imagine scenarios with compassion and love and care going on with that other person, and you can just work with your own field, then you just keep going back to it and keep working with it, then you can affect the field, and then when you see that person again, it'll change it. Now, if you had a conflict with a stranger and you're never going to see them again, and they just left you with some residue, basically they triggered a complex in you, all you have left to deal with is your own complex. And thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Stranger, for triggering it so that I could get into it and work through it. So that's how you have to do it when you're alone. You have to work with your own field. You have to go, fishing for this material and pull it up into your consciousness on your own and process it. And I always talk about the emotional processing technique. Everybody that doesn't have one of my books, like Transforming Darkness, shadowtechalchemy.com, just go there, get on the mailing list, get the book, and look at the chapter, or it's in the Shadow Work Practices chapter on emotional processing. And there's a bunch of stuff in there. Not every kind of shadow work is in there. I actually mainly just concentrate on the stuff that me and Melissa did. But that emotional processing is very important. So that's how you can work with this when you're by yourself, or with family members, that are not going to do this with you. Like I was explaining, that's the ultimate way, is to do it with people that will do it with you. And then there was something else I was going to say about Lauren's situation, about she thought that she was not so good with let's see, don't have good conversational conflict skills. Yeah. Well, you will. You're working on it right now, and you will. And I know you, and I know you have bravery, and I know you have willpower, and I know you have a lot of introspective capacity, and I know you're on this path for good. So you will develop good relational conflict skills. And if you can just kind of adopt this ethic, it's like you join a religion, you become a Christian or some other whatever religion it is, and they're like, these are our ethics, this is how we deal with stuff. This is like that too. And so the ethic is that everybody that I value and that I want to have a relationship with is going to hear about this stuff. They're gonna hear about this. And if it starts with in a conflict when I start talking about it, or if it's just in another conversation, they're eventually gonna figure out, this is what I'm doing, and I can see stuff now. I can see stuff, and I want to work with this stuff, and this is what I do now. This is who I am, and this is what I do. And then they take you or leave you on that basis. And so once they know that that's what you do, and you have to be gentle with people, and you can't just start totally analyzing and just raking them over the coals with analysis. But the way I do it is, with Melissa, when you're living with somebody, I would, there would be many opportunities to keep the conversation going. So maybe during the fight, maybe right after the fight, maybe the next day, maybe the next week, and you just kind of keep going back to it and remember when this happened. We're still cracking that open. We're still working on that. So when you're living with somebody or you have somebody close, then you can kind of just keep cracking it open. But when a friend or a family member or something, the way I do it is right after a conflict, as soon as the complexes have calmed down, I say, okay, so I realize that we both got triggered and we have a complex that's living in the relational field between us. And a lot of times you can say, this has happened before, and we both recognize this. And then I can tell you that here's what I think is on my side of it. And if you can't say it right after the conflict, you can come back and write an email or send a text or whatever, and you can say, well, here's what I think is on my side of it. Here's what I think I'm contributing to the field, and here's why I was triggered. And you don't say anything about what the other person did to you. It's all about your particular reactivity and how you inherited that reactivity, and how you notice that this is a cycle that you've had with other people, and how it has to do with a certain sensitivity that you have and that you're working on. I know I have that sensitivity. I know I have that trigger ability, or I know how this happened and I'm working on that. I'm still working with that. And then you apologize. So you present to them your self-analysis and your apology, and then you put it there. And then if they can come with you, then they'll come back and they'll say, well, here's where I think my side of it was. Here's my side of it. And if they can't, well, then that just calms it down or whatever. And you got to keep giving people chances. And you just keep doing the same thing. And they will either come up to speed or they will naturally move away. That's the way it is. And this is your religion, this is your ethic, this is your operating system now. And so that's the way it is. And so you invite other people into this way of being by living it yourself, and then they either take it and go with you or they don't. And so that's more information kind of on how we do this. Let's see here what you guys are saying now. I got to get to the last one. So Lauren says, right, exactly. My complex is alive right now, have been waiting for a long time. Like I basically was so fixated on moving forward, I didn't realize what I forgot. Yeah. I mean, right. This is because this whole path is this is enlightenment through descent, right? This is redemption. I've called it before, redemption through descent. That's what this is. This isn't redemption through ascension. It's redemption through descent. And that's that's the Jungian way. That's the alchemical way. It's another way of doing things. It's a more feminine way. And Shelley says, I love this perspective. I will likely see this stranger again. Well, it's not a real stranger then, right? It's just someone that's kind of around. But so I will work on the field between us until then. Yes, just work on the field. You can do things like, just imagining yourself hanging out with them, laughing with them. Try to use your empath qualities that you have, and try to take some essence of the feeling of how that person feels to you, and try to simulate it inside yourself. Try to bring them into the space with you, and then try to imagine yourself doing things with them. Or if you feel that other person has a hurt child in there, you can maybe take care of their child. You can see them as a child, and you can speak to them sweetly, or hold them, or encourage them, or however you think it's best to interact with their inner child, or just hang out with them, or whatever you feel in the moment is the best way to interact with this virtual version of them. And the most important thing is you're seeing the virtual version of them, but then you're feeling the feelings of the movement through the conflicted feelings, the feelings of victimhood or the feelings of aggression. And you're just moving through that until that starts to break, and you're breathing through it, and you're moving through it, and you're just, you're using your compassion, and it's compassion towards them and towards you. So that's how you're kind of working on your field. And then you can let me know how that worked for you. What do you think I would do with people who are in my past now? Just work on the field? Yes, just work on the field. Just work on my reactivity and really connect with its origin and let that heal the field. Yes, totally. People who are in your past, and you, I know you personally, and I know you're very good visually. Lucky you. I'm not as good visually. And so you can really do detailed visualizations, and then you're also very empathic, and you have a lot of access to your feeling state. So you have the natural talent to do this. And so you can bring those people in the past into your holodeck, Star Trek Next Generation, into your holodeck, and you can have a heart-based experience with them. Hi, Carlos. Enlightenment through descent sounds beautiful. Yes, enlightenment. I think I was calling it redemption through descent, because enlightenment always has that kind of moving up into the sun and all that, ascension kind of attached to it. But it's enlightenment through descent. Yes, you can say enlightenment through descent, redemption through descent, evolution through descent, whatever you want to say. Yeah, it's that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. We're going backwards in order to go forwards in a new way. I need to move through my own resentments, because it's a resentment, I think, in my... Oh, yes. Oh, my. Yes. Please. Yes. That's a big one. And that's something I got to write that down, Lauren, because that term and that type of shadow work, I have to add that to my descriptions of shadow material. All these books and articles and things that I'm always writing, and so I always am relisting what shadow material is and stuff. I'm gonna have to. Resentment is something that hasn't really been on my list, because I don't have much of it. I got other stuff, but not that. And what's the guilt is like the opposite of resentment, right? And there's a little bit of that still, a little bit, but not that much. I've cleaned out a lot of junk. My kind of main work right now is golden shadow work right now. That's what my main work is. She feels guilt too. Yeah, we're going to be working on all this stuff. So, you can do all these kinds of exercises, these visualizations mixed with your getting your heart in there, getting that in there and stuff, and clearing all this stuff out and allowing it to move. Allow the ego to let go of it. And I know the ego's not consciously trying to attach to it or identify with it. And I know you're not really, some people, a lot of people identify with their shadow material so much. They will create a story about it. And the story is actually step one. It's not that making a story is bad. Making a story is good because you're actually taking material that is chaotic and not linked together, and you don't understand where it came from, and you're putting it into a narrative structure, and so that you can pull it up into the ego and make sense out of it. So scripting or making a story out of your trauma story is part of the process. But you just have to remember that that's a step. Use it for a while and then let go. Use it for a while while you need to use it, and it'll always be in the background and all that. It'll always be in the background, but it you can start to let go of that story. And it takes a while. Let go of that story. And it can feel good to. Also, Melissa and I, we worked on, one of the things we were working on is taking the story. So first making the story, a lot of times the story is back there already, you just haven't identified it. You don't really know that you have a story, but it's back there, it's coming out of your mouth, it's coming out of your behavior. Other people, if they're sensitive to this, somebody like me, I could look at that and over time, I could be like, okay, here's the story. She's speaking this story, right? And then I could mirror that back to you and be like, okay, here's the story as I see it so far. Does this sound like your story? So once you become aware of the story, then you can start. Then you can start doing stuff with it. Then you can make art out of it. And that's another way to process the story and stuff. And so and Melissa did this, and so she put it into her songs, we put it into music videos, we put it into stage performances. She made performance art out of it. And that was a good way to relate to these archetypes and relate to these concepts, or these concepts. Everything is a con something, right? It means with. Complexes. And so art is a good way to work with the complexes without, in a fluid and symbolic way that is the language of the psyche, the Jungians would say. So that's one thing that you can do with it. And if you're just kind of open to what this material wants to do, it'll kind of tell you what to do with it. You just kind of feel, and that's, it's an interesting thing as I kind of realizing. I've been talking a lot about feelings today, and my whole feeling state consciousness is way more evolved now after this phase of life with Melissa than it ever was. So this is I've talked about this before, my anima, integrating my anima. Melissa was holding so much of my anima because she, like so many women, is really in touch with her feeling state. And she's very right-brained, and she was very, artistic and mystical and all that stuff. And so she was kind of, I had that in my life because she's holding it right there. But having her in my life is invigorating it, is inspiring it inside of me. And then she dies, and then at first I'm traumatized by the whole situation. And then I slowly have to kind of pull my anima back into myself. And now, oh man, the whole thing is a big setup job. I mean, it's really weird. It's like the whole movie is a big setup job for my evolution. All this is a setup job for my evolution. And even Melissa coming into my life and then dying on me is a setup job for my evolution. It's like there could not have been a better way for me to be initiated into my anima and into my feeling state and into my feeling state intelligence and be able to actually put this into use for myself and help you guys and stuff. I mean, it's like she was an angel in disguise that said, I'm gonna, and it's like I've told people this when she did come into my life. I told her, I said, I thought my heart was shut down from a past relationship. And she said, she put her hand on me and she said, right here, and she said, I'm gonna help you open that. I'm gonna help you open that up. Which she did, not just through her life and being with me, but through her death too. So yeah. And then we have Michael Smith in our tribe too, and he's a heart-based shaman, and he reminds me that how this is done and what it's all about. See what you guys are saying. It's like something in me is blocked. You are unblocking it, Lauren. And it's just that the psycho-mystic, synchro-mystic point of view. Yes, Theo says. Hi, Theo. Yes, it's exactly right. The I'm gonna write that one down. The synchro-mystic POV. Right, that's how we live. I gotta respell it. SYNCHROMYSTIC. Spell check doesn't like that. That's exactly how we're living, yes. Yeah, that's it, Shelley. That's how it was done. That's how it's like, this is the path. And this is what's coming to me. And you know, that's why I made that movie about me and Melissa and all that, because we knew from the very beginning, from when we first got together, we're like, okay, something's going on here. What we're doing together is important. We knew it. And we thought we were going to make a movie like 2 years in, like a year in. We're like, whoa, what we're doing is amazing. We need to make a movie about ourselves. And then we realized, maybe it needs to be a comic book, we thought. Maybe it needs to be a comic book. We're not going to be so grandiose to, make a documentary about ourselves right now. We realized that was a little too grandiose. And then we went through the comic book phase and we started writing the comic book, but then that kind of fell down. And then I ended up putting the first book out, which is like a nonfiction shadow investigation book. But we always knew that eventually there's going to be a movie. We had no idea it was going to be me making the movie about Melissa after she was gone. But if you watch the movie, you'll see there's scenes where we're talking about, our concept called living in the movie and synchronicity and how that this movie is going to be in film. She said this, we're making a documentary. She said, we're making a documentary about, well, first let me back it up. We used to have a phrase that we used to say, life is like a movie. And in our movie, we're making a movie about directing the movie of life. Life is like a movie. And in our movie, we're making a movie about directing the movie of life. That was like our little motto. And there's a scene in the movie where she's talking about that, and then she says, this is going to be out. This is going to be in film festivals all over the world about how to evolve your consciousness. And she used to have these grandiose kind of fantasies and stuff. But you know what? So now I made the movie, and now I'm shopping it to film festivals. I've submitted it to like over 40 film festivals, and the film actually got selected for the Hermetic Film Festival in Italy. And there's not too many film festivals out there that are all about esoterica and hermetica and that kind of stuff, but this one is. And so they're going to play the movie at their film festival in, I think it's in April. Is it in April? No, it's not in April. It's later this year. The whole it's later on this year, sometime later this year. So I don't know if I'm winning an award or not yet or anything, but people in the theater are going to be able to see it, and whoever the judges are going to judge it in that category. And so there's an opportunity that it might win an award. And then there's a whole bunch of other festivals. I don't know how many of them will select it or not, if any, because it's esoteric. It's a homemade movie made on iPhones. For the most part, iPhones, iPads is mostly what it is. It came out really cool though. It doesn't matter, it's because it's so real. It's so real life. But so we knew that what we were doing was important, and we documented everything. I filmed everything. I recorded everything, all our good stuff. I always had a phone or an audio recorder, and I was like, oh, I got to get that. And I'd turn that on. I got more audio than I did video, but I got so much video. So we knew that we were doing this, and I just didn't know how it was going to go down. Reposting this question. Beautiful. I feel this approach of working on the field aligns with the concepts of entanglement and unity consciousness. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Would you agree? Yeah, of course. I mean, that's kind of the physics behind it, even though, nobody knows really how that works. I like all that kind of stuff. I listen to Bernardo Kastrup all the time. If you know Kastrup, Bernardo Kastrup, he's my favorite philosopher. And he's a Jungian, and he's a deep philosopher, and he knows all the physics and all that kind of stuff, and simulation theory. It's called analytical idealism is his philosophy. And so I'm into all that stuff too. Yeah. Well, thanks Theo. I feel good about that. Yeah, thank you, Shelley. I feel good about how I wasn't even going to put it in. I wasn't going to try to submit it to film festivals and everything. I was just going to put it on the internet. But there was I was doing the editing, and there was that one scene where we're out in like the parking lot of this amazing nature spot that we used to go to, where we got a lot of our downloads, Mount Wanda in Martinez, California. And she was like all invigorated and excited about, we'd get into these conversations, and they would get very charged and invigorated with amazing energy. And she was talking about, what's going to eventually happen with this material that we're putting together. And once I saw that, I was reviewing the footage, and I'm like, oh my God, she said that. She said this is going to be played in film festivals all over the world. And I'm like, oh no, I have to do it then. I have to go through the process of submitting it to film festivals. Even though that's kind of a grandiose fantasy, I still have to go. That's her wish. I have to do it. And so, not saying it's going to turn into a giant hit or whatever, because it's really, with all this material, it really scares people unconsciously. So it really scares people, but I know, and that this is one of the downsides to being an alchemist and to doing this and committing your life to this, is that you're really kind of on the fringe. And all we can do is just hope that more and more people are going to come into this. And I do realize that now that the traditional roles and the careers and all the the structures of civilization, your ability to look at the 1950s or whatever, or just any time in history, you find what your career is, what your vocation is. A lot of times in the old days, it was doing the family business, and you go into that role, and then that's your safety, and that's your place in life. And that's all being thrown up in the air now. Right? The technology, the culture is moving so fast, and wars and disruptions of every kind, and the culture is moving so fast, and everything that AI and all kinds of other, AI is just the next version of the Industrial Revolution. And so no young person now can depend on a retirement and a pension and a stable job, and they can't depend on any of that. Nobody can depend on anything anymore. So what that means is that you're going to have more and more people who are going to have to do their own thing and just be creative. Like Theo, he's in Thailand, and I don't know how he's doing it, but he's being creative. He's having a creative bohemian lifestyle over there. He's being an alchemist over there, and if he needs to move out of there, he's going to move out of there. He's going to go wherever he has to go, and he's going to be aware, and he's going to be able to move and do what he needs to do, and stay on top of things, and be resourceful. We have to be resourceful. And more young people are getting out of college or not going to college anymore, and they're realizing, okay, I have to be resourceful. And I really like all the people. There's a movement called Exit and Build. Derek Bros talks about that. John Bush, they talk about that. And it's nothing new than from the Back to the Land movement of the 60s and 70s. Or, the intentional community movement or eco-village movement. That's kind of more bigger in Europe, or has been, but it's in America and other parts, all over the world. Intentional communities and kind of off-grid living, and farming. Regenerative farming is kind of like the new thing now, and living off the grid. But that's kind of more of a farmer lifestyle. And I would say that is one of the directions. The downside to that is that, you're really dependent on the land, and then you're dependent on the government around you, the being stable enough that, some crazies are not going to, take your land or tax you off your land. So that's the downside to that. But the upside to that is it's very stabilizing, especially for raising children. We were talking about raising children earlier and how some people that will be the right thing. And having kind of a back to the land farmer type lifestyle is great for children. So that is kind of one direction that a lot of people can go into. But then this bohemianism that I was talking about earlier, this how what we're doing is a form of bohemianism, is how I started. For people that came in later, you can go back and listen how I talked about how being a 21st century alchemist, a psychospiritual alchemist, is sort of on the, it's coming off the same archetype, you could say, as bohemianism, and just sort of artist, intellectual, outsider lifestyle. And the farmer thing is not really that. It's another good mode to go into, and a lot of people are going to be able to go into that, and it's a great mode. We need those people. But this is more intellectual, this is more spiritual. We're kind of more on the side of, shaman, priest, alchemist, those kind of terms. Mystic, those kind of things. But let's see what else you guys are saying. Yeah, right, you agree with that, yeah. So that's kind of what we're doing here, and that's what the path is. And then I'm kind of here as somebody who, thank God for Melissa, she's woke me up to this and say, she helped me to see this is the path you're on, man. This is what you're doing. You're an artist, alchemist, you're a bohemian. We didn't even call it bohemian. That only came to me more recently. A woman named Megan, actually, who has been on this program, she wrote her PhD dissertation on not totally on bohemianism, but in a way related to that. It was partially a personal story about some people in Australia that were living bohemian lifestyles, and her boyfriend at the time, who ended up dying tragically, was in that movement, and how she had been forever attracted to that movement, and then she started studying it and everything. But that's when I I'd heard the term and I kind of knew what it was, but it hadn't really clicked for me. And then it clicked, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a type of bohemianism, is what this is. And so anyway, I talked a lot about that earlier in the program. Now let's see where we are with our time here. So it is now 9:20. So we've been going. So we're almost. I generally do 2 hours, maybe do a little over 2 hours or whatever. So it's kind of whatever you guys I think the bulk of what I wanted to talk about, the alchemist mindset, the alchemist lifestyle, relating it to bohemianism, and I think I just want to finish again where I was when I was just kind of saying, so everything's kind of collapsing and falling down. And then so this modality that we're talking about here, it does appeal to a certain type of person, but there's a lot of people who would be doing this modality there's a lot of people who are still thinking that they're looking for their niche in the matrix, in the traditional role or whatever, and they haven't quite figured out that you don't need that anymore. That's breaking down anyway. So just focus on yourself. Be creative and develop yourself. Make your highest project the development of yourself, the healing and maturation of yourself. Make that your highest priority. Make that your life art. That's what Melissa called it, life art. Make it life art. And then, secondarily to that, make your relationships life art. Make alchemical relationships your priority. Get into alchemical relationships. Get with other alchemists. Do alchemy with them. Merge with other people, and then, of course, you're going to have conflicts with them, and then use the practices in the conflict and learn and master the domain that way. So and then it rubs off on everybody else, and then find the others, and then bring them in, right? We're like missionaries. We're missionaries. People are so turned off by the term religion and everything about religion, and it doesn't turn me off, because when I think about religion, I think about the origins of religion. I think about the archetype of religion. I think about the psycho-spiritual complexes of the collective that channel what we call religion. I don't think of religion as a thing. It's like saying cooking is hamburgers. Cooking is spaghetti and meatballs. Cooking is this recipe. No, I don't care about the recipe. Make whatever recipe you want. I'm talking about the process of cooking, right? So when I say religion, I think about Mircea Eliade, the sacred and the profane, homo religiosus, right? Mankind that lives through and for the sacred, rather than profane mankind that lives the materialistic, profane, flatland life, right? That's all the ladder climbers and all the matrix stuff. So this is a way, in the Eastern traditions, these are ways with a capital W, right? The Jungian way, the alchemical way. And so we have to be missionaries of this way. First, we have to live it up to the absolute highest standard that we can. And that's why I use stuff like the 4 quadrants and all that, to look at all the different dimensions of human reality and say, how can I clean this up? How can I clean this up? How can I clean this up? How can I bring transparency and integrity to all domains of life? Right? And then as you do that, wow, now you're part of something very important. Now you're part of something very, very special, very, very important. And that if you once you get into this and you start cleaning up and cleaning out and everything, you realize, oh man, mankind needs this. And if mankind was tuned into this lifestyle, we would have a completely different world. But at the same time, you recognize that you have no right to, and it just doesn't work, to claim that your vision is the vision and everybody has to join you. You have the right to run your experiment in the grand laboratory of humanity. You can run your experiment in there. You're allotted one laboratory. that you can run your experiment in, and then you can share what comes out of your laboratory with other people and pass that on. And then other people, if they want to run the same experiment, well, then they can. Or if they want to modify it and do it a little different, then they can. And then you just have to trust the whole the collective unconscious of mankind to tune into this, or realize that what we're doing now is just, one version of it, and then what it's going to be in 100 years or 500 years is going to be more advanced than where we are. We're not that advanced. We're going to be as advanced as we can be, and then we're going to let other people take it from there. But what we're doing is very, very important. Very, very, very important. And in fact, I can't think of, once you tune into this and what this way is, I can't think of anything more important and more advanced to do in anywhere in the world. And I'd say the only competition with this is other psychospiritual practices and lifestyles that are other people are living in other parts of the world. There are people doing, whether you call it alchemy or not, but they're balancing themselves and they're balancing their field. They're on the path of enlightenment in some way or another, and they're balancing themselves, and they're raising their consciousness, and then they're going into the world with raised consciousness. And there's many ways to do that. So those are the people, those are our colleagues, those are our peers. And even though they may have a little bit different way than this alchemical, enlightenment through descent type way, this shadow work way, the Jungian way, it might be a little different way of doing things. That's because there's different personality types. There's different people that have different kinds of inner material. So there's different ways. But those are the people, those people are on equal footing. Whether you call it Buddhist, or whether you call it this or that, or whatever you call it, Taoist, or, yogic, or whatever you call it, shamanic, whatever you call it. And that term is kind of all messed up now. But anyway, the Tao, yeah. Life art. The life art of health, balance, and wholesomeness should be the norm for all. Right. But we do, another thing that comes to mind right now, also Lauren says, yes, to the life art and making your relationships your life art. Man, tell you what, like I've been telling her, most important thing to me, I told her, yesterday? Most important thing is the living expression of personal creativity, my personal creativity, and alchemical relationships. If I had children, then that would be the third thing. But since I don't have children, it's about my living creativity and my evolving relationships. Those are the two most important things in the whole world to me. And I kind of feel like that's kind of the basis of what we're talking about here. Theo says, no one shoe fits all. We'll have to figure out new roles for ourselves as our society changes with cutting edge technology and science, Jungian psych, etc. Yeah, it's going to be a mix. The technology is going to be there. And then we have to develop the inner technology. And we can't let ourselves get too sucked into the outer technology. But, but then the other thing I was going to say on Theo's comment about health, balance, and wholesomeness should be the norm for all is that, back to integral theory, when you look at integral theory and you look at the stages of consciousness, it isn't actually until you get to second tier, what's called second tier. It's beyond the green meme is the sensitive self consciousness. And then once you get to second tier, then you can think like how we're talking about here. And most people are not in second tier. Very few people are in second tier. And it isn't until you get to second tier before you can really start going, oh, okay. Now you can still have spiritual practice. You can, be in spiritual practice at any of these levels. But to really do this kind of holistic shadow work that we're talking about and relational alchemy, this is second tier stuff. And so we, as second tier people, we just have to kind of really master this in our own community. And our job is to find the other people in our community now and let help other people to the degree we can, no matter where they are. But the most important thing is for us is our community needs to get a hold. We need other people who are dedicated to this, who commit their whole lives to this, and who won't back down when their complexes get triggered, and will stay the course. And that can only be determined in due time. But so that's like so we're helping other people at every stage and all of that. But for us, because we're right at the beginning of this 21st century alchemy, new human potential movement, new bohemianism. What are all these terms that we've used? We don't really have proper terms. We're trying to figure out what it is, but we're finding each other. So if anybody knows anybody else, a single other person that's at this level, bring them here. Bring them here if you know a single other person. And probably there's all the people on here probably don't know more than one other person max who can be at this level. But if you do, bring them here. Bring them here. Tell them to go to my website, shadowtechalchemy.com, download the last book, look through it, and then come here, and then we'll start talking, and we'll share notes, and we'll keep inspiring each other. Okay, guys. So 9:30, we're good. We've had a great show tonight, and as always, I love you guys, and I totally appreciate you guys coming over here and hanging out and inspiring me, and you are my tribe. You guys are my people. And so I love doing this with you. And so if anybody came in late, you can just go back, when this ends, within probably a minute or two or something. I think it's pretty quick. You can go back and rewatch it from the beginning. And we just talked about this whole alchemical way and everything, and what this is all about. So, and if anybody also has any questions or anything that comes up during the week, you're free to send it to me, and you're very welcome, Theo. And thanks to everybody else that was in there, to Shelly, and of course to Lauren, and we didn't see Carlos today. Oh, there's Carlos. Hi, Carlos. Yes, you were there, or you may still be there. Thank you, Carlos. And Committed Energy, thank you so much. So there we go. All right, everybody. Have a great week, and I will see you next week. Who else do we have here? Somebody else. Oh, that was Shelly saying love. Love you too, Shelly. Okay, bye.